cannot help but to bop my head to the Seconds Out Live intro music. Gets me pumped for another edition of said Seconds Out Live. Thank you to everyone joining in the chat. It's a prosperous chat already, getting through and debating the headline of Seconds Out Live this week. Of course, I'm not alone in discussing all of last week's action and looking forward to this week's action as well too. I'm joined by Josh. Don't let failure get to your head. Don't let success get to your heart. Or is it the other way around? I think I've got that wrong. But Josh, you're the right way around. How you doing?
I'm very good. I'm just confused by this little ring nickname type thing that you've given me there. Baffles me a little bit, but as ever, happy to be here on Seconds Out Live, making my monthly appearance, I suppose. How's everything with you, Ayman, though? How are you?
I'm good. A little bit tired, trying to lose a stone. So I've just come off a burner session at McCracken's gym, but plugging away, putting the gloves on and getting a feel for what it's like at the highest of levels. Definitely not me being the one at the highest levels, but definitely getting a slice of the action. We'll jump straight into the action here as well, too. Got a lot to discuss. And first of all, look, is it about a month or so ago now since that Wembley date? It was a resounding win for Daniel Dubois against Anthony Joshua, the veteran of the sport, someone that's been described this week as the savior of heavyweight boxing, British heavyweight boxing, someone who's had those lift-offs and looking to establish himself back at the top of the sport. But it was Daniel Dubois who put a stop to that. And AJ never looked really in the fight, but for the crescendo at the end of the fifth, I think it was, he came back with a big shot and then was stopped by an even big one from Daniel Dubois. And we're discussing as to whether the rematch is going to happen. And from Frank Warren's recent comments in an interview he did with TalkSport, he's recently said this: Dubois will fight early next year. We're just looking at a few matches. I hope we get it done by next week. Who he'll be facing. It may be AJ, it may not. It depends. But whatever happens, he'll be out. We'll see what happens with that AJ rematch. And I've got no problem with that fight. I'd fight it. I'd have that fight all day long for him. So it seems a little bit uncertain right now as to what the next step is for either Dubois or AJ. We might get an announcement maybe this week, considering there is to be a much rumored big press conference coming this Wednesday. But let's ask the chat first of all, as our mod father or Vinnyographer Vinny Kiss will put up the poll for you all to have your say as well too, as to what you think the next step should be for Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois. Do you think they should rematch each other? Do you think they should both wait for the Fury and Usyk second fight and see what the fallout is there, and then take either the winner or the loser for either of them, or they should fight another? Let us know in the chat as well too as to what you think that is. But we'll jump straight into some of the comments first of all before I get your take. Josh, you can think about it a little bit more before I come to you. As the poll just slightly blocks my view there. Here we go. So, Vinny, I think you'll have to put that poll up again. Dog Serious says, AJ, don't want another beatdown. He should retire. Well, you cat to be kidding me, right? Meow. He's not retiring. He says he's going to continue, I believe. And he's looking for another fight. Is it going to be Daniel Dubois? Ainsley Shan says, why should he retire, Dog Serious? Lennox got sparked out cold, not once, but twice. I didn't hear people say retire. Give AJ a chance to put the wrong right. People too quick to keep people too quick. That's such a mouthful. That has messed me up. Right, I'm going to move on from that one. That'll be in the seconds out live. What's the word I'm looking for? Seconds Out Live bloopers at the end of the year if we ever do one of those. Fabian Asensio says he can't retire in that way. It's not really a choice. Jerry Larry says Dubois should fight Usyk after he beats Fury. D. Chanel says Anthony, the rematch clause Joshua should fight somebody else. I'm saying Wilder. That might be one for another choice. Ainsley Shan comes back and says Fabian, I agree. You wouldn't retire after that. No boxer would not at this level. Custody system. If AJ versus Daniel Dubois fight does not happen in Feb, AJ should retire, in my opinion. He said he wants to become a 3-time world champion, and Dubois is offering him another opportunity. Interesting point there. And we've had those kind of little threads and lines from the likes of Hearn and others to say that that's what AJ is interested in. AJ wants titles. AJ wants world title opportunities. I remember when the build back was, and it was put that to him as to when he was looking to rebuild, and he said, "Look, I'm just looking out here for money now." And that since has shifted back. I wonder if AJ will shift back to looking for money. Ashe says AJ got mauled. Thunder Road. Welcome back to Thunder Road on Seconds Out Live. Joshua shouldn't retire, but he should be in no rush to fight Dubois again. There are better challenges out there. Yeah, he did not mean he should retire when he could win a rematch. People said call it a day. He's finished after Ruiz loss. What are the better challenges than be given the opportunity to fight for a third world title? Eddie has said for AJ, it's the world title now, legacy and not money. All about three-time champ. He's got plenty of money. Rod Brown says for Eddie, it's now cash in time. What else have we got here? We have Frank Warren said that Dubois will fight in Feb, so it cannot be Dubois versus Fury or Usyk. Fury AJ will always be there. Alexander Usyk first coach. That's not me. Shout out to big James Ali Bashir. Hopefully speak to him soon. What's next for Nicola Hope? Well, I'm not too sure. You can tell me. 8 beautiful golden 8 dragons. Capote, how come you're also in the Boxing Psychos podcast? They seem like reprobates on their Boxing Asylum that has podcast. I'm there because, and on SecondsOut Live through and through, sure. But I got my start basically from the Boxing Asylum. I wasn't there during the days of Tommy Allen and that, but when Steve Wellings was hosting the podcast, I remember I was getting my start doing my own stuff on YouTube, and I was commenting in the chat. Someone from the Asylum saw my chat, clicked on my channel, said they'd like my channel. Steve Wellings then picked up that and said he'd have a look at it, thought nothing of it at the end of that podcast. And at the end of that, 5 minutes after the podcast ended, Steve left a comment on my videos and said, good work. I then messaged Steve on DMs saying if he had any advice about getting into the industry. And then the ball kind of rolled from there. And suddenly I'm here hosting Seconds Out Live with Josh Hart. Let's go to Josh Hart. Josh, you've had some time to think about what could be next and the possibility that this Dubois versus AJ rematch might float away from us for now. What do you think? Do you think that's the right course of action for both of them? Or do you think they should fight each other?
I think it's better that they don't rematch. I think the first fight was such a conclusive result that there's no need for a rematch. It was not one of those fights where it was back and forth and one of them just got clipped. It was, without being disrespectful, I don't mean in a disrespectful way, it was complete domination and destruction from Daniel Dubois. There was not one part of the fight that was remotely competitive, in my opinion. I just don't really see the need for a rematch. I don't really see what can change. So I'd rather see, if Josh was going to fight on, I'd like to see him go fight someone that's not Daniel Dubois, maybe. Look at that Wilder fight, see if the Dillian White fight's still out there. And then for Dubois, there's some good fights out there. You know, I'm seeing in the chat people saying Bacoli. Honestly, so you got to remember here, there is an IBF final eliminator between Bacoli and Catterall. So I don't know when that will take place, but I think the winner of that fight, either way, I think Catterall or Bacoli against Dubois makes for a great fight. I think they're probably my number 2 and number 3 for who I'd want Dubois to face next. But my number 1 has to be Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker has been waiting for an opportunity for a while. He's coming off 2 of the biggest wins in his career, beating Zhang and Wilder. Give him that opportunity. Give him his world title shot. He's been waiting for it. He's ready to go. You can see he's ready to go. He was on the broadcast a month ago at Wembley saying he's ready for a fight. If it's not Joshua versus Dubois 2 next, give me Dubois versus Parker immediately, because Parker deserves that shot.
Interesting takes. And I just wonder, like, with all kind of, the IBF mandatory and everyone kind of putting themselves in the position for the belts to flitter away once the undisputed rematch, albeit not for undisputed, takes place, as to how the belts fragment and who stays, who captures titles, who moves away, whatever the case may be. People are positioning themselves for those positions, but really the decisions, the choices are going to be put down to what Riyadh season want and the fights that they want and the matchups that they want to see here. So I don't know if maybe apart from maybe the IBF, who seem to be more strict on their titles, and I think you've seen already that Artur Beterbiev has got to go and straight defend his IBF titles, as amongst the other ones as well too, against Michael Eifert. They're going straight in on their rules and regulations, and that's going to be something to look out for as to whether things can be circumvented or not for rematches to take place, or other fighters to be put into the position of fighting and contesting for those heavyweight belts. Look, if we were to get the rematch with Dubois and AJ, who would you favor in that fight, Josh?
If we were to get a rematch, I'd favour Dubois even more. I backed Dubois going into the first fight personally. I just thought, when you look at the stage of where they are in their careers, AJ's been there at that top level. And I know there's this big talk about he's not fighting for money, he's not fighting for fame anymore, he's fighting for legacy. And I believe that. I do believe he's fighting for legacy. But he's already headlined Wembley. He's already won world titles. Dubois has never experienced that. Dubois was the world champion going into the fight, but not getting the credit and not being seen as a world champion. The fight was almost being viewed as like it was for the vacant title. Dubois is getting that credit now. I've seen so much praise for Daniel Dubois in the last month since winning that fight than what I've seen throughout his entire career. And you can't not favour Dubois in the rematch. Don't get me wrong, like I said in the last point where I was talking, if the fight was close and it was just a complete shootout until one of them got knocked out and they both landed big shots on each other, then fair enough, you could still favour AJ in the rematch and make him the favourite. But with the way how that fight played out, the only bit where AJ had a real bit of success was that last 15, 20 seconds before he got knocked out. But apart from that, I can't really see any part where AJ was in that fight. I didn't give him a single round throughout the whole thing. And Dubois was onto him early. Dubois got onto him from that first bell. And you can't not favour him in the rematch. He was so dominant and destructive in that first fight. You can't really see anything other than repeat for Daniel Dubois. And that's just how I see it. But you can feel free to disagree with me, but I just believe that Daniel Dubois should open as a massive favourite heading into a rematch if that is to happen.
The thing is, well, too, is that people will still, or opponents will still want to target AJ because he's still one of the big money, if not the biggest money fight in that division. So AJ finds himself in a position where every other fighter who's not contesting for a title, even then those who like Fury still won that AJ fight. Usyk might not as much, but I think he said in the past he would be happy to do the trilogy fight with AJ. Can't quite remember if I'm getting that right, so I might have to scratch that one. But Fury has definitely called himself out. I think everyone knows in the heavyweight division that there's a lot of money, a lot more money to be made when you're in the opposite corner to Anthony Joshua. But this is the thing. We've got a comment here that says here from ADB04, like AJ's finished, simple as that. I don't think AJ's finished all. There's still some good competitive fights for AJ to have. At the top level, it becomes a lot more harder to establish yourself, and fights that we feel that had significance in his career and other careers as well too seem to have lost a lot of luster and interest in them because of the way both the careers have gone. Of course, I'm talking about a Deontay Wilder fight. We haven't heard anything about his retirement. We heard kind of signals that he will continue in the ring. Do they do that now? It's not the fight that it once was, but is that an option that they go for, and one can kind of really shout to the rafters that they're back because they've got the knockout victory over the other? That's the way the fight's likely to go, in my opinion. In my book, that's not a points fight by any means. Someone ends up on the canvas, unfortunately, in that fight there. But they do they do something like that? They've got bad blood to reboil in the form of Dylan White, who is looking to return to the ring. Not sure of the situation in terms of his license and being licensed, whether it be by the British Boxing Board of Control or another. But there's history there to rekindle. And is that another way back for Anthony Joshua to get back into the big time boxing mix and then wait for someone to pick up a title and he be the other side of that? I think there's very much legs in Anthony Joshua's return and a route back to world title contention outside of something immediate as a rematch against Daniel Dubois. There's been no kind of signal as to it being the immediate rematch with Daniel Dubois either. No kind of normally in the boxing business you get a little bit of a leak, you get a little bit of a whisper, and if there's talk about the things that are being announced in a week or soon, and there's no signal of it being an AJ Dubois rematch, it looks like it's likely that they were moving on from an Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois contest in some form. Let's go to the comments here and see what you guys are saying. Shout out to 200 in the chat right now as well too. Lovely to see you all in here. Make sure you click the like button and subscribe as well too, and drop all your opinions in the chat. We'll get to as many of them as possible. James Burns shouts out and says, how about Dubois versus Wardley? Josh, Dubois versus Wardley, interested?
Not just yet. I think while Fabio Wardley's win was great against Fraser Clark and couldn't have really done anything better in that fight, I don't think that's the fight to make next. I think give Wardley someone like a Jermaine Franklin, I'd say, next to see where he is. And then we can start talking about the bigger names. We can start targeting that top 5 of Fabio Wardley. But I wouldn't say next, no.
Have you got another name for Wardley? Because I believe Jermaine Franklin and Fabio Wardley have been sparring, and they were sparring for this camp against Fraser Clark.
I said Otto Wallin. I think Otto Wallin could be a good test for him, maybe. But again, one of those, some people like it, some people don't. Personally, I think the fight with Otto Wallin would be a good fight to make next, but I don't know.
Sahar Lekovic says, we just had Usyk become undisputed, without doubt, best heavyweight on the planet. Needs to move into an era where fighters earn titles, not just buy them, either poor opposition or constant rematches. I think we're getting that now. I think we're getting better matches now. That's going to be one of the real advantages of Riyadh season, as to some of the matchups being made. And look at, just for example as well too, I know that it's been ordered, but still, like, you've got the likes of, and it's been talked about as well too, two fighters who are avoided now in the form of Bakoli and Ajit Kabayel. All right, then let's stick them together, and one of them won't be avoided afterwards. One of them earns their position, and the other said boogeyman is dealt with, unless it's a draw, of course. Lewis Hart says, Austin McCracken can't save you in our spar. Let's get our spar arranged, Lewis. I won't need any saving from anyone. Alan Healy, AJ would win the rematch. That's for some controversial, Alan. Let me know why you think that would be the case. Is anyone bored of Joshua's endless rematch clauses? Says Deej Channel. AJ versus Wilder, shout from Thomas Newman. Fury will fight AJ. That's a given. It's a fight that we've got to see, I think, too. But Fury might be off the back of 2 losses to Usyk, and it'd be a fight that we've seen by as two fighters who have lost to Alexander Usyk, fighting each other for maybe another opportunity. No one needs to see the rematch. It was dominant from Dubois, says Khaleesi. Stephen says, hello, Ayman Khan. Hello, Stephen. Exactly, Khaleesi. AJ looked amateurish in the Dubois fight. Let him rematch and see whether the beating from Dubois was not a fluke. Jerry Larry says, AJ should fight Fury after he loses to Usyk. Being beaten for 50 minutes straight is not a fluke. Don't talk silly. Dubois is clearly a better boxer. AJ fighting Dylan White can be after the Dubois rematch and then Fury and retire. None of them are dead, says Dangerous Daisy Dillinger. They are running on limited fuel tanks. Looking at both Fury and Joshua fuel tanks, I would say they're the same. Nothing wrong with acknowledging this, and I think there's not quite finished the sentence. Ben Davidson does not think Dubois is better than AJ. If he took on Bakoli and KO'd him, I'd say here comes AJ, but he wouldn't take Martin on, in my opinion. There's a call there. I'm sure Billy Nelson, and maybe you're Billy Nelson in disguise. There we go, saving for each other. That's what he said. When will Josh Hart utilize the cough button? I think you mean the mute button. Josh he doesn't want to say it, but
I've been clicking the mute button on some of them, but sometimes coming out unexpectedly.
So you got to let people know you're ill. So you mute some of the coughs and then you don't mute any the other coughs.
Well, yeah, no, because I don't even know if the mute button's actually working. So I muted the last one, but I don't even know if it's actually doing its job at this point. I'm just praying that I stop coughing sometime soon. I do apologise for everyone's ears for the coughs, by the way. It's not my fault.
That's right. Blame it on the button. Blame it on the button.
Yeah, sure. Blame the button, man. Blame the button. It's not me.
Let me open the curtain a little bit. Josh is a little bit under the weather, but he's here. So 3 cheers for Josh in the chat for jumping on when he's a little bit under the weather. Fair play to him. If it was a close fight, says Khaleesi, I would say the fans will demand a rematch. It was so one-sided. AJ couldn't handle his dominance. I was also surprised how aggressive Dubois was. Jerry Larry's not backing Wardley against Dubois. Stephen believes that Joshua's coach was humbled. He's been boxing for 5 minutes and didn't listen how good Dubois was. Parker versus Dubois, surely, shouts Sam Roberts. Unfortunately for Joshua, the audience is ready to move on to the next generation. Joshua is like Federer when Nadal and Djokovic started dominating the tennis. I always liken Gennady Golovkin to the Federer of boxing. Never, and not to say this about any boxer, but there was never a bad story about Golovkin. He was always kind of respectful to his opponents, in my opinion. He always put on a good show. He was entertaining and never had the sport in any disrepute. So I always likened Golovkin to being the Federer of boxing, at least in that generation anyways. Wardley needs to fight from 10 to 15 ranked guys. Snapshots reviews. Let's get the snapshot here. Get the sense Dubois wants to be undisputed. In order to do that, he has to remain competitive. The best way to remain competitive is to keep fighting the best, and that's not Joshua, says Snapshots reviews. Rematch is pointless. Let's see Dubois, the winner of Usyk versus Fury. Josh, let me jump to you whilst I'm reading these comments out. Do you rate Dubois' chances against a rematch against Alexander Usyk or against Tyson Fury?
It's a tough one. It's a tough Usyk. I give him a better chance than the first fight just based on the experiences that he's been through since that first fight. So I give him a better chance, but you still have to make Usyk a favourite. When it comes to Fury, that's the one that really intrigues me. It really does intrigue me, the prospect of a fight between Daniel Dubois and Tyson Fury. And it might be a bit outlandish, but based on what we've seen from both recently, I do favour Dubois slightly. If you look at Fury's last two performances, Ngannou was a very under par performance from Tyson Fury. And then Usyk, a better performance compared to the fight against Ngannou, but didn't get the job done. So, I don't know, it's interesting. And when you look at Dubois' run of form as well, a career best performance last time out, his confidence is sky high. It's hard for me to not favour Dubois. I'm not saying I'm like betting my house on Dubois to win, but if I was to compare the two and who would I make the favourite and who would I think will come out on top, I'd be happy to put it out there and say I do think Daniel Dubois has the ability to stop Tyson Fury, but that is obviously a very, very outlandish call. But you need to have a bit of controversy nowadays. So I think Dubois could get on very well against Tyson Fury.
Remind me who you picked for Dubois. AJ versus Dubois.
I picked Dubois. Swear to God, I picked Dubois.
Well, no, it'd be on record. You'd have to swear. It's on record, is it not?
Well, no, because I'm not. I don't do these live shows very often, so there's nothing actually out there of me saying it. But if I was on here and was able to call that, I would have featured in that 50 predictions video like you did. Mm-hmm. But instead, I had to make sure you were featured. So, but I want to put it for the record. I did back Dubois going into the first fight. You can ask my family members. I was sat down with my mum and dad watching it, and I said I fancy Daniel Dubois to beat Anthony Joshua tonight, and it happened. So that's why I back him. I back Daniel Dubois in every fight. I'm a Daniel Dubois super fan, some would say.
It was a 50 boxing predictions video. We couldn't have it be 51, Josh. That's just too many.
Well, I did put the offer out there. Do you want me to quickly record myself making a prediction? But apparently that wasn't like a good enough suggestion. So maybe next time. Maybe next time they fight, or if they have the rematch, just get me on. Or can I just put the prediction out there now so I can feature? Could just
if you want, go for it.
Whack it in there now. Joshua Dubois 2. I'm going to say now Daniel Dubois knocks him out around the same time.
There you go. You got it. You had your moment in the sun there, Josh. Let's jump back to the chat. We've got a thriving chat as well too, and we will be moving on to another heavyweight topic in amongst also mixing with some promoters. But we'll jump back as well too to AJ versus Dubois rematch being likely to be off. We believe it to be the case anyway, at least from the signals that are being put out by certain people in the business. But I'll jump into the chat first of all before we move on. It says here, Ainsley's hand believes you got COVID. I guess he can tell just from a stream. Big Chunga says, nice one, Josh Hart. Fair play to lad. Fair play indeed. Custom System, if Dubois does not fight Joshua next, who is next for Dubois? It cannot be Fury or Usyk. Frank Warner said Dubois will fight in February. AJ should just wait for Fury last fight in UK and call it a day. Who else I've got here? Did you know that Dubois? No, let's not do that one. I smell BS. No, he definitely is ill. Our poor Josh is definitely ill. I picked Dubois to KO Joshua, although I thought Hrgovic would beat Dubois. He's on a roll. He's on an absolute momentum roll right now. Can we get David Hart on the live stream to confirm? I don't know if his name is David Hart. Thunder Road says, Danny B. Flexen must have interviewed Dave at the Dubois estate today. Look forward to the interview. Any idea when that should be available? I'm not sure if Danny did catch up with Dave Dubois, but I will ask Danny, of course, if that is the case. And I'm sure you'll know very soon if we've caught up with Mr. Dubois. But it'd be good to speak with Dave very soon, especially with a potential announcement, we believe, looming for Daniel. AJ would easily knock out Usyk, says Sean McSweeney. 3 times the charm, 2 bites to the cherry. Maybe the third one does it. I know that Ben Davison and his team are very confident of that happening. No, I'm saying that I don't think Josh predicted Dubois. How many shots does AJ get? It's a joke, says Rod Brown. What a run Triple D is on. Indeed, Danny Gilfillan says, I would like to see Ayman fight a polar bear. No polar bears for me. I'm a lover, not a fighter as well too, especially with animals as well. Big. My cat looks a little bit like a small version of a polar bear. Sean McSweeney, I know you're joking. Don't worry, Sean. I appreciate that. Right, so we'll move on to more heavyweight talk mixed with some promoter talk. Again, we will come back to AJ versus Bob. We've got a poll to settle as well too, which you can vote in. 3 options there, so make sure you get your votes in that poll. We've got a large voting pool right now, but some of you haven't registered your votes, so feel free to do so. The poll is running. Daniel Dubois versus Anthony Joshua next fight. Is it a rematch? Is it wait for Fury versus Usyk or another? And then get those comments in. Ayman's just a goofy guy. Goofy indeed, and glasses on too as well. And it's no glove lost between Ben Shalom and Frank Warren have gone back and forth regarding Boxer stating, or Ben Shalom stating, that they were looking to launch an investigation into the customized gloves that Fabio Wardley wore in the fight with Fraser Clark, which left Fraser Clark severely injured. And thankfully, first and foremost here, Fraser Clark has come out and said that he is okay. He had surgery. His surgery went well. He's recovering, and he's had some time to have a think about it. And he wants to return to the ring, and he wants to return and have another go at the professional ranks, which is fair enough for Fraser. And Fabio Wardley moves forward, and looks for another opportunity. I know that Portman Road, I think it is, in Ipswich, is somewhere he wants to land for us, a big homecoming fight, British level, whether he stays at British level and tries to win the title outright or moves on to European or further. The world is kind of Fabio Wardley's oyster, and I know that he's definitely shrugged off the white collar background, but the context is there because he was facing someone who had that Olympic background, pedigree, and the resources funneled into him from the EIS system. But yeah, it's now Fabio Wardley who moves on to the bigger scene. But what's kind of been taken the spotlight away from them a little bit is Ben Shalom and Frank Warren, who Frank Warren has since come out on interviews. I think it was on Box Nation. He's called him, he's not very happy and wants to go a couple of steps further in reaction to Ben Shalom's comments. And he's calling him clueless as to the situation, and believes he's bringing their sport into disrepute. Look, more and more promoter back and forth here. Josh, which a lot of people like and don't like in the industry. But what have you made of Ben Shalom and Frank Warren kind of butting heads this past week?
I enjoy it. I enjoy seeing it happen, but this one just seems a bit different to me. Like, Ben Shalom coming out there and talking about the gloves, I'm not too sure about, especially when, Fraser Clark's team would. It's what Frank Warren said. His team would have been in the rules meeting and checked the gloves over, and then the board hold on to the gloves until fight night, and then they sign them off once they've been wrapped. If it was, if there was a genuine issue there and the gloves were genuinely custom, but from what I've heard and from what I've seen from watching various interviews, it was just custom colours, but the gloves were completely fine. But it's interesting. It gets people talking, I suppose. The controversy in this sport is what always gets people talking the most. But it has took a bit of the shine away from Fabio Wardley's statement performance in a rematch that we thought was going to be a copy and paste of the first fight. Didn't have any of that. It had none of that. It was round 13, and that was that. So I feel like it has took a little bit of the shine away, but that's boxing. Maybe Ben Shalom just wasn't too sure what to do because it wasn't the best night for him last week in Riyadh with Ben Whittaker and Fraser both losing. But I don't think it's any reason to go out there unless he had genuine suspicion, which he has said there was. He said there was genuine reasons as to why he raised that suspicion. But I think going public about it might have not been the best idea. And saying it in interviews, it's probably something you should probably keep away from the public until you've got proper ground to stand on and not just throwing out these accusations, I guess you could say.
What about the kind of the fractured relationship between Ben and, I guess, to put myself in their shoes, Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn seem to, I guess Ben kind of sees them as ones that aren't too happy that he's got his foot in the door now with Riyadh Season. They've signed a deal, a partnership with Riyadh Season as well too, with Boxer. So they're in the fold now, and some feel kind of in the industry. I think I was speaking to Johnny Nelson, MBE, who stated that, those doors aren't going to be open for people, and they're not too happy that they've got a slice of the cake, to paraphrase them as well. And there was a bit of a push in the press conferences or the weigh-in, whatever it was. And this was like, it is interesting how this has kind of all developed, because it was before the introduction of Riyadh season and Saudi Arabia into the boxing world, or at least as prominent as it is now. Ben Shalom and Frank Warren came together to make a deal to make Joe Joyce versus Joe Parker. And the push and Ben Shalom's kind of vocals, the way he was speaking was, look, we want to work with other promoters. We want to make these big fights. So he was one of those who, when it was COVID times, it was COVID period, and Frank Warren put out a 5v5 poster, which is completely different to the 5v5 that we got to Eddie Hearn. And they were talking, they were receptive as to, yeah, you know what? After we come out of COVID, we'll meet. And I remember pushing them and said, look, no excuses now. It's COVID. Why aren't you meeting? And the meeting never happened until fast forward later down the line, and a large introduction of some money to make some fights. They started meeting and started collaborating a little bit more now. So, but even before that, Ben seems to want to push those fights together and made that deal with Frank Warren. And now it's got to the point where it's, I mean, fights and things can still get made, but not does it matter really to be best of friends as long as you're not against enemies? So you, at least the fighters can prosper from big deals to be made and money to be made for fighters' purses and pockets.
As long as the fighters are still getting opportunity, and the promoters can clash as much as they want, but as long as they can come to an agreement to make a fight and get, because ultimately the promoter's job is to get their fighters the best opportunities, whether that's for world titles or the best fights for the best amount of money. As long as these relationships and, you know, I guess the disagreements they've been having over the last week, and it's not just even in Riyadh last week, there was a few disagreements and I think a little altercation on stage between Eddie and Ben Shalom at the press conference for Joshua Dubois. So it's not the first time this has happened. But as long as the fighters are still getting their opportunities, then I don't see a problem at all with it. But once it gets to a point where, if we remember before the influence of Turkey Al Sheikh, we were at a stage where it was very hard to see cross-promotion fights, especially between Matchroom and Queensbury. But we're at a stage now where they're working together and we're seeing the best fights. You know, we saw the 5v5 this year. Look at the Fury Usyk undercard in December and we see Dennis McCann versus Peter McGrail. It's a great fight. And as long as these promoters keep working together on a business sense, they can continue to not get along. But if they keep doing business together and making good fights, long may it continue. Because at the moment, we're in a period of boxing where we're seeing the best fights. We might not be seeing them in UK shores, but we're seeing the fights. We're able to watch the fights. Would you rather not see these fights at all or see these fights elsewhere? So, yeah, I know I've gone off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I do believe as long as all these promoters keep doing business together, let them have their disagreements about whatever, but as long as fights keep getting made and fighters get opportunities, then I don't think there's any problem at all.
Yes, I'm not too sure as to whether there's any legs in the investigation of the gloves, or if there will be one in any way. I think Fabio Ward's come out and said, yeah, the gloves were loaded. The gloves were loaded with my fists. And I wouldn't imagine Fabio Wardley or any of his team to be the type to look to try and get any unfair advantage. I don't think this is a Louis Resto, Billy Collins Jr. situation, and it would be absolutely abhorrent if there was a reoccurrence of something similar to that sort of situation. But I don't think that I wouldn't want to believe that that would be the situation here. Ben believes, I think, to paraphrase as well too, that you got kind of expert opinion from a doctor to say that gloves wouldn't do that, that sort of thing, or wouldn't leave that sort of injury. But we're in boxing where any sort of crazy freak sort of things can happen, and a doctor's opinion, not to discount that, a doctor's opinion on it at all. They're the expert there, but you speak to a doctor about boxing, and they'll probably say to you, you shouldn't box, or boxing shouldn't be a thing because you're taking repeated punches to the head there. So we'll see if anything comes of the investigation. I don't want to discount the investigation, but until there's something more to it, then we'll have to see how the situation develops there. We'll move on as well too from that situation, and I'm sure there'll be more as to the relationship of Ben Shalom, Ben versus ex-promoter at the moment. And we'll move on to Adam Azim, Starboy, one of the jewels in the boxer crown. Adam Azim, trained by Shane McGuigan, looked in blistering form against friend, still friend, but a foe for however many rounds it lasted. And he got the finish against friend O'Hara Davis, who has since now retired from the sport. Did you see the fight, Josh? What did you think of both Azim, and it is the right call for O'Hara to hang up the gloves?
I wasn't able to watch the fight live, but I watched it back yesterday morning. I watched the full fight on Sky's YouTube channel, and I thought it was a phenomenal performance from Adam Azim. I think he looked the best he ever has in the ring there, especially against someone like O'Hara Davies, who, okay, might have not been at the level that he once was in his career, but regardless, is still always a very dangerous fighter to face. And I just thought Azim was spot in there, perfect, and a real statement win, a win that he needed to get. He needed to look good against O'Hara Davis to make that statement. And we've seen him talking in a way that we've not seen in his career before. I've seen people asking questions about Dalton Smith, and he's coming out there now saying he's sick of the guy and he's going to teach him a lesson when they fight next year. I've not seen Adam Azim talk like this. Maybe this win has been a real confidence boost and taught himself about how good he really is. As for O'Hara, I think it's the right time to retire. I think you can't really disagree with him retiring at this stage. He said he's not enjoying boxing anymore. If he's not enjoying it, why keep doing it? So he said win, lose or draw, he was going to retire either way. So I think fair play to him. Congratulations on a great career. And again, fair play for him to call it at a time that he has. He's not continued too far on to the point where we're questioning whether he's still healthy or not and whether he should be allowed in a ring. If he was to make a comeback, I don't think anyone would disagree with it. People would welcome him back with open arms. But if he wants to get out now, especially when he says, I've seen him in interviews talk about how he's invested his money into different properties. So he's clearly got a plan of what he wants to do. So I think him retiring now when he's not enjoying it anymore and he's still healthy, I think it's the perfect move for him. So overall, I'd say it was just a great main event and the best possible outcome for both, because O'Hara gets to retire with everything, with all his health still intact, and Adam Azim can go on now into 2025 and look at some huge fights in the super lightweight division.
Yeah, so just on O'Hara, I remember watching a YouTube video O'Hara Davis did. This was before I was in boxing in a full-time way and I was making my way in the sport. And O'Hara was one of the first to go onto YouTube and make a few videos. And I think the video is still up there on O'Hara Davis's YouTube channel. And he was talking about how he'd made many mistakes in boxing and the way he maybe spent his money and maybe threw away a lot of money when he could have invested it and fell into that pitfall that many boxers do fall into. And it's sort of like, I remember writing a comment on it that it was a bit of a letter to himself as to make sure that he didn't make those mistakes again. And I think he's since channeled his resources into buying properties, and he leaves the sport with, like you mentioned there, his faculties intact. He can speak well. He's got property. He seems to want to continue the sport in some form. And the other side of it though is like he will kick himself. He will kick himself, and I'm sure he kicked himself after the loss to Ismael Barroso. I'm sure that kick gets a little bit stronger and a little bit swifter again as he hangs up the gloves, because that was really all set up for him to capture a world title against Barroso, and it just went all horribly wrong for him. And he since said, like, in his preparations and everything, in the fight week, he just couldn't sleep. He couldn't get there in the full form and reflection of himself on the night, and it just wasn't meant to be for him, which is a shame for someone like O'Hara. But for Adam Azim, he looked brilliant. It looked scintillating. I thought that, with someone that so well, and everyone previous opponents would have been an enemy, this was a friend. So this might have been a mentality battle for him, and it might have struggled to dispatch of a friend or someone that when you're coming through, when you're the young kid, O'Hara is at minimum one of the guys, or if not the guy in the gym that you're looking up to. You're looking to watch a few things from him, pick up a few things, and then emulate him on the bag or on the pads. And you've seen this guy come through, and now he's someone ahead of you, in front of you, looking to block you from where you're trying to get to. But Azim didn't seem to care too much about that at all. And when he got the body shot on him, he went into the corner, he roared at O'Hara to get up so he could finish the job. It took a couple of extra rounds, but he did it. He looked great. And there's a couple of things that he did there. He ticked a couple of boxes. One, in his ruthlessness as the levels get higher, and the two, the chin check test. But any prospect in boxing, there's a lot of bluster from promoters as to how good they are, and if we as boxing fans think, yeah, they are great. But when you look at it a little bit more and you hear ex-prospect is this, that, and the other, and then sometimes they falter, you kind of wonder, are they as good as they're cracked out to be? Can they take a shot after they've not had it all their own way? And Adam Azim, this is something that people kind of looked at Adam Azim at, and he answered that completely. He took a few good shots from Ahara Davis, who's got punch power. Ahara does, and he hit him, and Adam Azim took it. He wasn't rocked, he wasn't shook by it by any means, and he fired back. And I thought that was a good little box ticks for Adam Azim. The big thing, the big question though, coming out of it afterwards is the next fight. And I'm sure this week, it being Catterall versus Prograis and Eddie Hearn being the promoter, I'm sure there'll be loud, vociferous calls for Adam Azim to take on Dalton Smith next. Josh, is that a fight you're particularly clamoring for and wanting to see next for either of them or this coming year?
I think so. I think we need to stop holding like these two prospects who are kind of moving at the same pace until they get to that world title level. Let them fight now. We can see what level they're both at, and then see how far they can go. Because there's no reason as to why they can't have a rematch later on down the line. So ideally, let's say, for example, Turkey's mentioned that there's a massive card coming up in February. Eddie Hearn said it's the best Riyadh season card yet. What's stopping us from seeing Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith on that card? Don't get me wrong, I know it could sell well at most places in the UK. Put that in Sheffield, I'm sure it probably sells out or comes close to selling out. And in the end, put it in London, I'm sure it does a great amount of tickets. But if it needs to be made in Saudi for that fight to materialise, so be it. Because I think it's the fight that's been spoke about with those two prospects for so long now. I remember interviewing Dalton Smith at the beginning of this year, back in February, and the fight was being spoken about when the fight first got ordered. And it feels right to make that fight. It's the perfect fight, in my opinion. Two prospects, or not even prospects anymore. I guess you could say two contenders, maybe, or two fighters that have world title ambitions. They want to get to that level, and they've beaten everyone they've fought in a fairly convincing manner. Make that fight next. Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith. Dalton Smith, Adam Azim, whichever way round people want it to go. Just make the fight next, because I really want to see those two in the ring with each other in the next 12 months. Because I don't know who wins. Because they both do certain elements of their game so well that it just makes it a tough fight to call. It's one of those fights, it's a proper 50-50, and a fight that British boxing fans, and I'm not the only one who wants to see it. I've been seeing it all over my Twitter since Saturday night. Make the Dalton Smith fight. So if I've not delivered the message enough, my final message, make the Dalton Smith fight. Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith, can we get it made in the next 12 months?
See, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure the calls are really there from kind of boxing fans as to really kind of this is an edge of your seat type of fight that needs to be made next. My finger on the pulse says to me that this isn't a fight that people are really kind of clamoring for outside of the Dalton Smith camp, Eddie Hearn. And look, I have no doubts that Shane McGuigan and Adam Azim aren't ducking the fight. That's not the case here. But is it really at its peak in terms of want and desire? I really don't think so. But the landscape changes where you have to wait and kind of get your fighter to a point where they have a world title to fight for, world titles between them to then fight. It's now at a point where the money is there and fights can be made because the money is there for either fighter to take it where it wouldn't be, and you have to wait for that point because of the introduction of Riyadh season. So maybe it does get made on a 5v5 of some sort, so Matchroom versus Boxer 1, or on a big undercard. But I'd actually like to see maybe both these fighters on an undercard together, and then you can sort of measure them a bit more, make that kind of rivalry a bit more natural outside of just the call outs. Anyway, we'll jump back to the chat here. It says DB Cooper 1 says at seconds out. Just Google Fraser Clark questioning Wardley gloves. It's on Sky Sports 1 a week ago. 25-second clip. Clark says his gloves are very, very thin before fight. I will check that out for sure. I believe that's an issue with the fly gloves as well too. So I will check that out. I haven't seen it, so I wouldn't want to comment on that just yet. Dubois needs to go for unification, says Cardinal Samuels. Everyone knew that once Joshua got hit back, he'd fold. Always matched well by Eddie rematch Hearn, but Eddie made a lot of money off of AJ. Thunder Road Ahara will fight again. I've just lost that. Here we go. He's very emotional. He'll say one thing at one moment and the opposite the next. So many boxers don't enjoy, but do it because it makes money. Harry Davis is just worried about his health after Barroso fight. What else have we got here? Flexion's interview this week. I'm looking forward to it, especially in light of Ayman's interview with Caroline, says Thunder Road. Why does Adam Azim need to fight Dalton Smith? Dalton Smith clearly needs Adam Azim Smith more than Azim needs him. Dalton shouldn't Dalton Smith be trying to fight for a world title? He's 28 years old. Says Stephen. Azim needs to stay active. Needs at least 2 fights before Smith. 2 Raw. Smith is 28, Olympian, and further in his pro career. I don't care much for it. Hearn keeps hyping it. Josh, before we move on to the last topic, anything else on the undercard from the Azim versus Davis fight card that took your fantasy, and you would like to make a comment on?
Aziz versus Edmondson. I do think the wrong man's hand was raised. I thought Dan Aziz had won that fight. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to see that because Dan Aziz was, at the start of this year was such a highly spoke about fighter. People saying, let's get him to world level. The big fight with Buatsi, he came up short there. Then obviously had the comeback fight at the Crystal Palace Stadium and drew there. And when we thought, Dan Aziz, can get his hands back on the British title here, and then loses it on a very narrow decision, and a decision that I don't agree with personally. I do think Dan Aziz was the right man to win. Obviously, quite a few upsets on the card as well. We saw obviously Michael McKinson lose to Mbenge, but a great performance from Mbenge. Just didn't really let Michael do a lot of his work. I've not had a proper chance to fully catch the fight yet. I've seen a few clips and a few highlights from it. So I need to go over that. But I like Michael McKinson. He's someone that I've interviewed quite a bit over the last year and a half since I first started doing interviews. So hopefully we can see a big comeback from him. But you've got to give credit where it's due. Credit to his opponent. Great game plan. Great fight. But overall, from what I've heard, missed it live. I heard it was a great night of boxing. I heard a lot of people really enjoyed it. So it's good to see. It's good to see that we're still getting these good cards in Britain, because there's been a bit of talk recently about the UK market. But we had a good card on Saturday, good entertainment, and hopefully we can see some bigger fights in the future.
Appreciate that, Josh. Let's move on to, and I'm sure you've been waiting to talk about this because it's you and me. It's our destiny. Josh, you're not quite my best friend, but the boxing world we must defend. And our courage will pull us through. You teach me, and I'll teach you. Got a Catterall. Josh Catterall versus Regis Prograis. What do you think about that one, Josh? You like that one?
I like the fight. I really like the fight. I'm not too sure how to feel about that little singing bit there, but fair play for having the confidence for it, because that was fair play. But no, on the fight itself, I think it's a fight that's gone a bit under the radar. It's a great fight between two fighters that have world title aspirations. Obviously, Jack Catterall, in a lot of people's eyes, should have been undisputed back in February 2022. And Regis Prograis coming into this, I think it's his first fight back since the Devin Haney defeat. And a lot on the line for both of them. If these two want to fight for world titles, they've got to go out there on Saturday and win this fight by any means necessary. So I'm very excited for it. I was at the open workout on the Thursday just last week, and they both look good. They both look in good shape. They both look sharp. And yeah, it is a good fight. And I do feel more eyes should be on this fight, but it's just not got that selling factor to the general public. So frustrating to see, but it doesn't change how good the fight is. So I'm very, very excited for this Saturday night.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to Jack Catterall being back out in the ring and him climbing back the ladder against Regis Prograis, who's a battle-hardened fighter, good fighter when it comes down to it, very much one who's happy to dug it out in the ring and happy to throw. I just wonder how much of the peak Regis Prograis we're going to get in this fight against Jack Catterall, because I was a little bit worried from the Regis Prograis perspective. And although it's the highest level fighting the likes of Devin Haney, another jab-heavy type of fighter, as is Jack Catterall, awkward type of fighter, doesn't really look to engage, passive, neutralizer type of fighter, as is Jack Catterall, but in his own unique way. The way that Prograis' kind of body reacted to things, the way he was moving, the way he was taking a few shots, maybe not even looking like he could hold a couple of shots as well too, was a little bit of a worry. And I don't want too much credit to be taken away from Jack Catterall. I feel we'll get the decision here on points, but against someone who was really good at world level, won a world title, and was brilliant in that fight against Josh Taylor. But that was a number of years ago now. I think Prograis is kind of here. It's good matchmaking, really, and therefore potentially for the taking. Although I don't think Catterall will quite get there. But it's another good name on Catterall's resume against Prograis. He'll certainly won't shy away from any fight. Whether it turns out to be a fight is another thing, and whether Catterall uses all of his technical proficiency, it's most likely here. And I think we see Catterall win on points. Anything from the undercard here, Josh, for you? I haven't got a Pokemon-related reference here, although I hope people have smashed that like button for that iteration. Although Daniel Gilfin is saying call it a day, and we're not quite calling it a day on Seconds Out Live just yet. Anything on the undercard that you like there for this weekend's offering?
There's quite a bit on the undercard I like. I really like the Chiefs' support in Reece Bellotti versus Michael Gomez Jr. Reece Bellotti is always guaranteed entertainment every time he fights, so I think we're in for a great fight there. You've got a rematch on the card, Jimmy Joe Flint versus Campbell Hatton 2, and a lot of pressure on Campbell Hatton's shoulders heading into this one. Obviously lost the first fight narrowly on points. Heading into this rematch, it's in his back garden. It's his first fight with Barry Smith and Ben Davison in his corner. There's a lot of pressure on him. Jimmy Joe Flint's come out in interviews and said that if Campbell Hatton loses again this weekend, that's his career over. I think that's a bit of a stretch because he is still very young. But there is a lot of pressure, and fair play to them for both taking the rematch. Obviously, Jimmy Joe Flint has had a fight since and lost the Central Area title that he defended against Campbell Hatton. But regardless, it's still a great rematch. And a lot of tension between the two as well. So there's a lot of respect between the two after the first fight. But I think they both know how big this rematch is for each other. Junaid Boston, a last-minute addition to the card, a fighter that I've followed since his debut. I really like Junaid Boston. I like everything about him. At the open workout last week, decided to make it a little family affair, had his little sister in the ring and was training her instead of him doing some training. But I do think this weekend there's a lot on the line for him this weekend. While it's just an 8-rounder, he is mandatory for the English title. There is a fight agreed there with Ishmael Davis. They're just a few things that stand out. Overall, I do think it. Sorry about this. I think it is a good card though. It is a good card. I do think it's just gone a little bit under the radar though, sadly.
Appreciate that, Josh. As we close out the Seconds Out Live show for this week, and we'll get the results of the poll in a moment. We'll jump back into Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois chat here. And I saw recently Daniel Dubois did an interview with Box Nation, and he suggested here, he sort of sent out a little bit of a warning shot to Anthony Joshua as to the potential of a rematch. Dubois said here that he was welcoming the rematch, and he was wanting to fine-tune the way that he finished the fight there. He really wanted to put a big exclamation mark, although there was a massive exclamation mark at the end of that first fight between them. Daniel Dubois seems to be in the mind frame that he also feels that he could improve further in that fight and do a job on Anthony Joshua a lot quicker and a lot swifter and a lot more emphatic than he did the first time around. He also suggested as well that maybe going into that second fight that AJ might have a few mental demons on his mind as to the way that he went out there in that fight. Josh, the thing I wanted to ask you is here, like, what would change from Joshua's perspective or game plan in that fight? Could he change it up the way he did against Ruiz and just be box heavy and on his feet for 12 rounds and move around Daniel for 12 rounds? Is that the way or route to success for AJ in a potential rematch?
I don't think so. I think Daniel Dubois' footwork is one of his most underrated aspects. I think it'd be very hard to try and just box Daniel Dubois, especially someone like Anthony Joshua, who isn't the most natural of boxers. So I don't really see that being the way it works. My throat's on absolute strings right now. Hold on. No, I don't think that's the way to go, though. I don't think he can box Dubois' head off for 12 rounds. I don't think he can keep him on that jab. I think the way to beat him is the way that Dubois beat him, is to knock him out. I know that neither of them really exactly go looking for the knockout. Okay, maybe Dubois might do, but he needs to let those power shots go. He needs to start quicker. I think that was the biggest downfall in the first fight, in the fact that the way Fraser Clark said it to me best in the interview that I did with him before the fight with Fabio Wardley, the rematch. He said, by the time Anthony Joshua had got into the ring, Daniel Dubois was already in round 2. Daniel Dubois was ready, and AJ just wasn't. AJ didn't start quick enough for what he should have. So I think the way to beat Daniel Dubois is to be quicker, and not start so slow and so flat-footed. And the low hands as well. I didn't really get the low hands that he had. But at the end of the day, at the moment, it's all just questions and what can change. But the only way we'll fully find out is if they have a rematch.
Absolutely agree with you. Vinny, let's close the poll and get the results from everyone who's tuned in to Seconds Out Live as to how they feel the next steps of the path for each of these heavyweights are in their career. And we have a result, and the result is, the question was asked, Daniel Dubois and Anthony Joshua's next fight, is it a rematch? Are they going to wait for Fury versus Usyk, or should they fight another? And we had a whopping, I think it might be a record as well for us, number of votes here. As Tommy jumps in and puts his 2 pence here, you can have it as well, Tommy, too. It should be AJ versus Wilder. Both are coming from knockout defeats. Loser should retire. Well, another landed 27% of the votes, like AJ versus Wilder or AJ versus Parker or Dubois versus Parker. That landed 27% of the votes. Running in just a percent behind for either fighter to wait for the fallout from Fury versus Usyk 2, the likelihood of Anthony Joshua taking on a Fury as the fight that we wanted to see for many a year, or Daniel Dubois getting an opportunity to fight for undisputed against Fury versus Usyk, ramps up 28%. And the Seconds Out Live audience has voted for, at 44% of the votes, a rematch between Daniel Dubois and Anthony Joshua. Josh Hart, what do you think of those results?
I mean, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but I don't think the rematch should be next. I do think the fight was very conclusive. I think there's other fighters out there. Like I said at the start, I'm going to say it again. I really think Joseph Parker deserves his opportunity. After, like I said, the 2 big wins that he's had this year, we don't even know if he's going to fight again this year, which is really frustrating. There's only the 1 big win this year, even, because the Wilder win was at the back end of 2023. It's frustrating. It's really frustrating for Joseph Parker, and I'd rather see Daniel Dubois versus Joseph Parker than Daniel Dubois versus Anthony Joshua too. I'd rather see Anthony Joshua take a step back for a bit, assess the situation, and go from there. But it looks likely, from what talks and rumours I'm seeing on social media, it seems likely we're going to get the rematch. And I'm not against it. I just think there's better fights out there to be made. So that's my take on it.
Appreciate that, Josh. And we'll wind down with the final couple of comments here. We've got here, IFF says, I'd like to see AJ versus Miller next. Miller is rumored to be taking on Derek Chisora. Whether that gets announced very soon is another thing, but that's the rumored fight in the offing for Jarrell Miller. Steven suggests that Catterall versus Prograis is a stinker, another empty arena for Matchroom show. Unfortunately, Thunder Road suggests as well here, how come you guys don't promote your socials more? Who is Josh Hart? Where can we find him? Does he support a football club? He resembles Phil Foden without the trim. Josh, respond.
So I resemble Phil Foden, but without the trim. Normally, when I get told,
all the skill, all the ladies, all the caps, all the.
Ayman, just keep going. Honestly, Ayman, just keep going. Honestly, I could sit here all day and listen to that. No, I mean, if you want to find me on socials, I can't even remember my own Instagram, to be honest. I think it's J0sh.Hart with 4 T's at the end. So feel free to follow me on there. I don't really know why we don't promote our socials. Ayman, I think you're probably the better person to answer that question. Why do we not promote our socials more?
Yeah, maybe it's something we should look into internally. But I think this is more Thunder Road asking for our personal socials as opposed to Seconds Out socials.
Fair enough.
We do tag ourselves in interviews that we do. But if you want to follow me, I was going to do that gag. Have you heard that gag where it goes, if you'd like to follow me, and then you turn, this is what my back looks like. I wasn't going to quite do that. But I'm on social media at Take Aims. Or don't forget though as well too, for everything Seconds Out related, follow us at Seconds Out Live, as well as where you can find us. But yeah, if you want to follow me or Josh is giving you his tag. I've given you mine as well too, so feel free to follow and support as well that way. Final couple of comments here before we wind out. Prograis is more washed than Josh Taylor was. DBW, you should see Prograis last live workout. It's terrible. Cheers, lads. Go take a glimpse of Josh. Danny Gilfillan trying to trip me up here. That was a terrible attempt at a pun name to trip me up. You got to come up with something more original than that one. So Dubois would you have for Usyk, Hrgovic, Miller, Joshua, then Parker? Interesting by Josh Hart. Good resume. That's definitely not one. That's definitely not the reason. Can't promote the socials because SO Boss is terrified of them pulling a Parsons on boxing social kind of move. Don't think that's the case here, or whatever the case was there. I don't even know what the case was, but that's definitely not the one here. Anyways, we'll wind down for another edition of Seconds Out Live. Thank you to everyone who joined in on the discussion in the chat, who left a like, who subscribed, who's supporting Seconds Out Live for another week. We've got a lot to cover this week as well, with a big press conference coming very soon, as well as all the action from Catterall versus Prograis. But as is customary on Seconds Out Live, a Danny Flexen tradition, we leave the last word to the co-host, that is Josh Hart. Josh, I hope you've got something good to say. I've sang or sort of rhymed the Pokemon theme and wound it into the Catterall Prograis fight. So you've got to come up with something big. I'm stalling so you can kind of figure it out in your mind as to what that's going to be, Josh. What have you got for me, Josh Foden? Phil, you get that cough, that unmuted cough out of the way. You've got
I'm sorry.
Have you got your own rendition here of Pokemon? Let's hear it.
Oh, I don't. Ayman, I'll be honest, I didn't really watch Pokemon or have anything to do with Pokemon growing up. So, unfortunately, I can't offer anything like that. I don't really know what I can offer here. Thank you everyone for watching. As always, it's been good. It's been fun. I always enjoy coming on Seconds Out Live. And yeah, just be prepared. Big week. A lot of big news dropping soon. DB Cooper has said the ganja has gotten to Joshua Hart. I don't believe so. Why? He says this every time. That's 2 lives I've done in a row now where he's accused me of being a weed smoker. Why? Where's this come from? I don't get it, DB Cooper. But anyway, thank you everyone for watching. Always appreciated. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow us on the socials. You can see the tag at the bottom of the screen. And hopefully I'll be back on Seconds Out Live again very, very soon.